I have had two near-death experiences. One when I was 6 and I fell like 3 stories off of some like loose scaffolds. Then I overdosed on PCP. Early on, I experienced what it's like on the other side. And you can imagine that influenced me and my intuition. So therefore, I had an attraction to spirituality, to psychology, just from those experiences alone. When I became a father, I started to embody love. Rather than teaching people about purpose and presence, I actually became more of that with my son. My mother died at 1:03 a.m.
If you were to be recognized or known for your ability to compress time for people, how would that be described by those who've received it or witnessed it? Welcome back, everybody, to Flipping the Lid. You know what we do here. We have real, raw conversations with some of the most influential and impactful people on this planet. People that are willing to go there, have the real conversations, tell not only their own stories, but also the relevance and how they show up in day-to-day life. I had a very brief conversation with this man not long ago on my live show. And, you know, even on our pre-show conversation, it was really interesting because he's really well known as a best-selling author. And he is somebody who's worked behind the scenes with the Chicken for the Soup Soul series. He's been with the E! Channel on HBO. He's a recognized thought leader in the psychological world and relationship coaching world and in helping people discover themselves better to move through this world with more impact. He's also a father. He's also got a very interesting past, and he's literally shed layers, which he used to do professionally, and now he helps others do it to step into clarity of who they are. And though I don't typically laugh in my introduction, the fact that you just laughed, Ray, I had to lean into that. So Ray, Doktor, I'm so grateful that we've got you here today, my friend.
Yeah, we'll just throw it out there. He's talking about from 1993 to 97, I was actually a stripper. I became a doctor of clinical psychology, but that is what he was talking about. And I stripped to make money to put myself through college. So,
yeah,
there you go.
But you know, sometimes little plays on words come to me like that one just did, where I'm like, well, he was shedding layers to get paid for it. And now he's doing this to help other people step into it. You know, and you laughed because you were like, oh shit, I haven't thought about it that way. But at the same time, it's true, right?
Yeah,
you did. Yeah. You literally shed those external layers to pay for your ability to shed the internal ones and help others do the same.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool.
Thanks.
You know, I did give an intro based on the little I know about you in our interactions and obviously what I can find about you outside. But just like I asked on the other show, the only question I ask everybody on each one of my shows after the intro is, outside of however I described you, who are you in your words?
Well, when people hang out with me, I'm the life of the party. I typically like to make people laugh. Sometimes it's at a shock value. I'm the one who, if I'm invited to, say, a costume party, for sure, if I can dress in drag or wear a tutu, that might be me. But yeah, I typically will push the envelope, sometimes that kind of strange humor that comes from Will Ferrell as well. But yeah, that's probably me. Most of the time you'll see me joking around a lot. And yes, there's a serious side, and no, I'm not avoiding a serious question or deflecting, but it's just me, and I'm filled with life. I also like to try new things, and I'm one of those people who feel like I can tackle anything. So as an example, as I'm talking to you, I'm looking at my garden. I'm waiting for things to start to bloom. You know, we're moving into like spring. And this is something I took on. And, people ask me like, wow, where did you learn this? I learned some of it from my dad, but a lot from YouTube or ChatGPT. So I'm one where like if I have the right information, I'll make it work in my life. So I've done a lot of different things in my life because of that. Before we had the internet and all these other AI tools, I'll basically fuck around and find out.
Yeah. Well, what I also appreciate about you is that what I just heard from you is that you don't really dabble in anything. Mm-hmm. Right? If you're really going to take something on, you're going to take it on. And I identify with that. I'm one of those that any hobby I get, I buy all the equipment I need, get all the resources I need, even if it's not going to be a long-term thing. Why? Because I want to prepare myself to reach the highest level of mastery in whatever I'm doing as quickly as I can. Yeah. And that clearly is even what you had suggested.
Yeah.
You know, what I appreciate about how you said you're the life of the party, again, I also resonate. I mean, my senior year of high school, I dressed in drag, and as I was leaving in the fire pit around us for Halloween, I told my mom I was going to do the best I could to keep my legs closed that night, right? And but at the same time, it's like, where do you bring a little bit of levity and humor? And I find that one of the greatest skill sets in this world is learning to not take yourself so seriously.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you embedded that in your answer. So where and how did you learn that ability? And when did you start to recognize it was also a superpower to connect with others?
Well, my father, he passed away, but he was a New Yorker. He was a New Yorker. So he was sarcastic. We always joked around. And like, I'll just give you an example. Like, he wasn't one of those men who would like walk around and try to be macho and so forth. Like, if there was some pun intended and it had to do with, say, his dick being small, he would actually joke about himself like having a small dick, like Howard Stern did. You know what I mean? Like, nobody did that back then. So he was kind of like, he didn't take himself so seriously. So I got that from him. And it's interesting, as I raised my son that way as well. Like, you can say anything to him and you're not going to hurt his feelings. And in fact, his response will be like, that's more about you too. He laughs about it. And so therefore he's not like hypersensitive like a lot of these kids these days, because the way that we've now, like many parents have parented, is that they approach parenting as like their child is not resilient, and that they have to make sure that they're safe and they're careful for how they communicate. And yet you and I grew up in a generation where like there was maybe public shaming, that we did get our butts kicked by our parents. And there were some who took on the victim mentality of that. And I'm not talking about those who were literally abused. I'm talking about like some people maybe never grew out of that and felt sorry for themselves. And then there are many that where it's like it created character. It created our identity, because, you know, when you have to walk to school and you have to walk past those bullies and your parents not driving by like a helicopter parent and like making sure you get to school safe, you have to figure out what to do. And what you do there with those bullies is what you're going to do in the business world. It's what you're going to do when you're in a relationship. It's like everything is a potential life skill moving forward, you know, in our childhood. So my father prepared me to be that way. Therefore, like, sometimes people will say stuff to me like, what if I were to say this to you? How about even my girlfriend? She would, when we first met, she would challenge me. I said, say it, just say it. And never have I crumbled. It doesn't really matter to me. But she does take things personally. Even when like, for example, I don't call her names, but let's just say it's an example of like saying, he's kind of acting like a dick. She might hear it as, you just call him a dick. And I'm like, no, the behavior is kind of dickish, you know, but anything like that for her, like she will take personally, like as if it's like name calling. And I'm referring to like our own kids. I'm like, I'm referencing my own son. I'm like saying, God, my son's kind of, he's tired. He's loopy. This is when he kind of sometimes gets into dick mode. I didn't say my son's not worthy. I didn't say that I didn't love him. I didn't call him a loser. He even will say it too. You know, Dad, I was kind of acting like a dick. I'm like, okay, we move forward. There's no argument. There's no self-protection or resistance. And he's a well-rounded, confident, fun, happy kid.
Well, and so here's the thing that I also want to call attention to. What you're not suggesting when you say, well, we grew up with all the shame in us. We grew up with these ways. We grew up with these patterns. Like, yeah, we made it okay. Yes, is there an overcorrection in some ways? Yes, of course, in everything that takes place. But you're not saying he just has to learn to deal with it and he's got to live into this current world. No, you're giving him examples. You're helping him learn to communicate. You're helping him to be in touch with what his actual feelings are. Mm-hmm. You're helping him understand his current state and how his actions and behaviors may be communicating something differently, right? You're teaching him.
Absolutely.
You're teaching him a lot of these skills that we don't learn, but it's when we don't learn these skills that we live in defense. Right. I mean, that's when those triggers hit. That's when the armor goes up. That's when people defend, attack, shrink, shut down, lash out, right? Retreat into themselves. And yet what you're teaching is similar to one of the concepts we teach, which is to have a strong spine and a soft front. Strong spines to know who you are, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, your heart, your intent, your soul, your desires, your boundaries, your value, your worth, delivered, right? In any environment. So you can be unwavering, which means I don't have anything to protect, justify, or defend. So I don't need to react. I don't need to get crazy. I can just objectively see what's happening around me and accordingly respond in a way that could diffuse it, redirect it, lighten the mood, right? It's a very different thing than saying, well, my kid is needing to just toughen up, so he's just got to figure this stuff out. No, you're actively guiding him as well.
Absolutely.
And I know you know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing that in. And as an example, my son, when we moved here where it's a small town and he's a city boy and he thinks a lot differently and he has more grit. And so he found himself offending people here really easy. As an example, with our neighbors, these are girls who were like 11 and a half years old at the time. My son was 7. He said, "What the hell?" twice. They told their dad, and their dad text messaged me. And I'm like, wow. Like, I have never got a text message ever in LA for this. Like, he's a really good kid. And even the dad, like, really likes my son. But he approached it like, oh, this is like bad language. And I, then later he like revealed like how he has sheltered his kids. But what I shared with my son, Max, is that you can be yourself. I said, but there's different ways you might be received. One is you're not relatable. 2, you're actually funny because it's the right person. 3, that you make these people cringy. You'll figure it out. But I kind of, it's not like what we like. And back in our day, it was like, you just go figure it out. You're on your own.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. For me, I'm more like, I'm going to share 3 potential realities and you choose, because ultimately he has to do that eventually in life also. So that's, how I would share information, with him.
What I appreciate, and again, this isn't about me, so I'm not going to go down all the different pathways that resonate, but there is a deep level of alignment in the way that we operate, in the way that we think, and clearly in the way that we even parent and lead. And I want to say I appreciate you for just a little bit that I've already even experienced around that. It's cool. And it's evident how much overlap there is.
That's all.
Yeah. I just appreciate even hearing how you approach it with your kids, and up to and including, I'm one of those big believers that feedback is permission based.
Yes.
Right. Most of the time. Right. And yet there often are people who are going to give feedback willy nilly. And what I often also believe is, do I always want to get better? Do I always want perspective? But am I always going to accept that perspective depending on the source or whatever framing that source is coming from? Like we have to be able to deconstruct what's actually happening in front of us as well, because sometimes it's 100% about us and other times it has nothing to do with us, but yet how we respond to it does. You talk about it so eloquently and so clearly, and clearly your dad conditioned a lot of this stuff into your life. But I also am a believer that a lot of the things that we do are a direct pathway of what we felt we needed to do for our own lives.
Absolutely.
You went down this path of psychology. Right? You did what was necessary and what was tough to not only have fun in certain environments, but to pay for your education. What was it about your story early on that put you on this path to begin with?
Well, I had no place else to go. No, okay. Of the Richard Gere scene when he's, being asked to was it? Oh, I forgot the terminology, and I should know this given that my father was a Marine, but he was trying to get him to quit. But I have had 2 near-death experiences. One when I was 6, and I fell like 3 stories off of some like loose scaffolds and came back, and then I overdosed on PCP. So you can imagine that like early on, like I experienced what it's like on the other side a little bit. And you can imagine that kind of influenced me and my intuition. And so therefore I had an attraction to spirituality, to psychology, just from those experiences alone. And so I, like if you were to witness me do a live coaching call or with a group, and it happens, I haven't done it in a while, where people will ask me questions. They'll talk about a problem, and within 5 minutes, I can get to the core issue.
I believe
very quickly. And I don't say that to brag, but I've been doing this for so long. But when I was younger, I kind of had that skill as well. And so therefore, I think I just had interest in getting to know people. And I was already a problem solver with many things. It's not just with working people's emotions and psychology. It's like literally like I'm moving, for example, across the country. I'm pretty organized on how to do that. And I'm really good at streamlining my life because I like to solve problems, and time freedom is everything to me. So it's just kind of the way I look at life also. And also just my approach to coaching is so different than most coaches out there. Most people, when they work with me, it's only 4 to 8 sessions and we break through. We just break through that bullshit and we get to where they want to be. Doesn't mean that they're 100% cured or they're like in some permanent place. It's where it's like they're now out of that dark hole and they start living a life that they want to live. They have now more positive feelings and beliefs about themselves, and they have the tools to keep them moving forward.
Yeah. By the way, another area I think we have complete resonance. One of the nicknames that someone gave me here in this last year is the 1 second psychologist, because that's my superpower, is compressing time. Also, you might not know this, but when I was 7, I was run over by a truck and my left arm was torn off, and I had a healthy relationship with mortality early, right? Like, it's interesting because a lot of these things do shape us. But at the end of the day, I do believe that time can be compressed for people in the most complicated areas of their life and their blocks. And you obviously, through the way that you facilitate, have ways of doing that. No doubt, given the interactions that we've had. And likewise, it's both intuition as well as a shitload of reps and pattern recognition that allows you to do it in less and less and less and less time in the same repeat process. You said you overdosed on PCP as well. How old were you when that took place?
16.
Okay, so 6 and 16, you had two different components. Now at 6 versus 16, see, my situation was different. And I do remember having a healthy relationship with mortality very early. What were the differences when you woke up from the incident in 6 versus when you woke up in that incident at 16, and the grasp on reality and mortality between each?
When I was 6, I wasn't aware of what happened. What happened is my friends, when I got up, they just freaked out, like as if I were a freaking zombie, because I'm gone. Okay. When I was 16, it was like I was seeing a life review and ways that I can better my life. And so therefore, it was more profound because it happened because also I was in a tough place. I was going through depression as well. So it really woke me up in many ways to start living my life differently. But not just that, my father never dabbled with drugs. He came from a different generation completely. And I remember being at the hospital and him asking me, not judging me, "Do you need help, son?" I get emotional here. Like, he just said, "Is there anything I could do?" Like, more like, "Do you need help with this?" And I said, "No." And because of his compassion and his love, I didn't want to touch that shit ever again. I never did. I just, it's kind of like that moment made me feel like his love even more so. And I had that connection with my father. Like, even when I was 18 and 19, I wrote a song called Father. And it was one of our best songs in my band. And we played it, and other teenagers would sing the song. And then when I recorded my actual official album, people can go on, like, I think someone said that my music is still out there, but the name of the song is Father. And I wrote that song in the late 90s and was finally produced in early 2000. And it was about my love for him and also our resistance. And it was the most magical moment. And it's also when I stopped playing music, because it's like sometimes people pursue a career or a dream to show someone that they did it, or they're trying to get some external validation, or they're just,
I'd say often, not just sometimes, often.
Yeah.
That's the norm, not the exception, I think.
So when I played the song, when it was done, I played it, and my father, he stood up and he started getting watery eyes, and we started to listen to the song. He was holding me, and my mother, there we go, came up by us, and we just all slow danced to it. If you hear it, it sounds like a very typical, cool, like 90s rock ballad. Very, very deep. And like, I felt everything there. And it was from those moments and moving forward also, even though I was already dabbling with metaphysics and everything else, I was also trying to pursue this musical career, but I no longer had the drive. It was where, like, there was a moment where that chapter was done. I felt love and I want to do something else. So I went back to school then. That's when I actually went to get my master's, my doctorate. It was like, okay, I like doing music, but like, who I really am and how I want to show up on this planet is to be a coach.
Yeah, I Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing the story, and even just in connecting kind of some of that resonance. What you also just modeled and exampled there is that you actually allowed the energy to move in that moment in a way that it no longer served a purpose beyond that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's also a place that many people don't identify and recognize and move from. And so both in places where trauma keeps us stuck, but then in that living against someone else's standards or learning to receive love, validation, and connection through performance, it becomes this self-perpetuating cycle. Yet you broke it relatively young. What do you attribute your high level of self-awareness, even at early ages, to?
I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to share something for a moment too, because what's interesting about this breakthrough I had with letting go of music, it also happened again when I was pursuing to be like a traditional psychologist. I walked away from it. I have a doctorate in clinical psychologist in psychology. However, there was limitations, and where I was working at a hospital with my hands tied behind my back, and insurance wouldn't cover what I was doing and helping patients with. So I recognized like, this is not a direction I want to go. This is not the reason why I got into it. So, that's kind of like, even like Western medicine, not to cut it down, but there's limitations. With traditional psychology, there is as well. And so I went a different direction. But what was interesting is after 8 years of busting my ass, I came to that place of like, this is not what I'm going to do. I can't go down this path. So it was like a dark night of the soul. So, and that will happen to many of us. And that's really, you asked the question. It's by going through many of those moments has made me aware that all there is change. All there is change. And if I move into my heart, that more than likely that change is going to be better. And I wanted to bring up something else too about the self-awareness and self-deprecation, because I find it to be comical. In the beginning of this, you said I was on HBO. You share, you kind of did some like name calling, dropping some names. So it makes me sound like I might be someone that is important. But at that moment also, I thought like, I had a moment of like, God, that's a lot of that is the past. And what I mean by that is I'm no longer in LA. And when I was in LA, I was getting a lot of phone calls, early 2000 up to 2010. Now the people getting called are more like the influencers, even if they have subpar information that they're sharing out there. I'm not judging it, but like many of us can agree like, wow, you're not really offering shit. You know what I mean?
Oh, dude, there's a lot of people out there talking and very few with anything to really say.
Yeah. Yes. So people, so it's more about like, okay, I want to invite this guest on my show because she or he has 1 million followers. And that immediately can like bring, more traffic to me. It's not about whether this person has value to offer and can create breakthroughs like on my show. So things have shifted a lot. But when I moved up here, I knew that it would be a little bit quiet. And recently my good friend Thomas was on ABC, not once, but twice in New York. And I asked him, I said, dude, like, how did you get that? And he shared how he wrote an article and just someone liked it and they invited him. And he said, what I did differently then, this time versus where I was before, was that I nourished that relationship. I sent them a note. I was more grateful. He said, like yourself, I took it for granted. Like, I'm like, I'm always going to be called because I'm good on camera, whatever else. And he got back on the show, but I haven't been on something what we might consider big since 2019. That was the Swedish Housewives show. I did some coaching, which is it's pretty fantastic. That was it. And so I've been quiet for like almost 5 years, but that's an illusion. That's an illusion because the real impact I make on this planet is every moment. It's in my beingness. It's with my son. It's with like you having this great conversation with you. It's amplifying and better and everything and everyone wherever we go. And so, but in that moment, when you were saying those things, I was catching my ego still somewhat think about kind of that outdated version of myself of competition to thinking that this is more worthy to whatever else. And I don't take it that seriously or myself. However, when I do move back east, I do hope with being in a different population, they'll give me the opportunity where I can share more on those platforms. But again, also like my life is good now. My life is good now. And if I never had those opportunities again, I wouldn't give a shit. I wouldn't give a shit. Yeah. I'm enjoying this moment with you. And through these moments of trying to move towards something and being knocked down and getting back up, I realize that many of us have everything right now. We have people who love us right now. We have support right now. And if we can connect to that like we would feel better about our lives.
Yeah. I really appreciate you calling attention to that. Again, not in any way a surprise. You and I are way more aligned than I think even we realize in this moment, or at least that you might be able to see, since I know more about your story than you know about mine. But there is so much strength in even communicating what you just did, because what you're also highlighting is how long the trash from our past can still stick with us, right? Like there's shame in that statement that you made, right? That shame, because both it's the seeking desire of all of that recognition for credibility and success. Again, love, validation, connection through performance. But I know, at least for me too, I never really dealt with, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, even though I've had moments there. Where I dealt with it was that top side of the arena, which is like, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to live so big? Who do you think you are to have all those credentials and credibility and having been on those shows? And yet at the same time, it was also what I was seeking for a long time, because that's what I believed was needed, right? I chased the dollar, had a full bank account, but it left me empty, cost me who I was. And there's a recovery path that exists for all of us. But what I also appreciate is you're right. It comes down to every moment, every breath, every interaction, and every moment that we can create value for ourselves and within our lives. But when we actually heal and we live in congruence, like that's the reality of what I see. Everything that's been most important to me my entire life, I have right now.
Yes.
I have less money in ways than I've had in different periods of my life, but I have everything that matters to me right now.
That's beautiful.
Everything, right? I've been going on, tomorrow is 2 years with zero physical pain after 31 years of daily physical pain.
Isn't that
right? I have everything I want right now. I never thought no pain was an option, right? Now I teach others how to get out of it, because it wasn't physical pain. It was emotional pain being manifested physically. And because my body's broken, it just amplified all of it, right?
Yeah.
And so what I love is how you're able to both answer the questions, but you talk about the self-awareness and self-deprecation side, right? Self-deprecation in a lot of people's place is in and of itself the armor that's there designed to protect themselves. It's the humor, it's the redirection, it's everything. But in your case, self-deprecation is humility grounded in truth.
Yes.
Right? Self-deprecation is highlighting the areas that could be perceived that you should be judged, criticized, or shamed, but yet that you're so comfortable in yourself that it's just making you accessible.
Yes.
And I'm only slowing it down and highlighting this in reflection, both for you to receive it, but also for the listeners to understand the real power in what you just did, which was brilliant.
Thank you.
Right? You stepped into truth, and it's evident how you've coached so successfully and how you've made your accessible through the process. And I would say that a lot of those inherent limitations in the psychology field probably came down to your inability to do that based on ethics and laws and sharing of personal information, when in reality, if you can connect the dots for somebody and they can see it in you, you can make it happen in them in minutes and moments.
I appreciate that reflection. Honestly, that's probably one of the best I've ever heard in my life. So thank you. You talked about your injury.
Yeah.
And I don't have, again, I'm comparing it, like I'm minimizing what I have because I don't see it as severe, but I have, half a thumb.
Yeah.
It was cut off. And I'll tell you the story. 12 years old, talking to two girls, one I was interested in. And I was leaning up against the house door and where I lived. And my brother happened to open a door. I fell down. And when I was getting up, my thumb was still there over the thresh hold. And it just pinched it right off. And blood shooting everywhere. The girls are screaming. My thumb was on the ground. My brother runs into the house and says, Ray cut his thumb off. And my dad was watching TV. He's like, what the fuck? And he jumped up really quickly, like almost like a Michael Jackson move. He grabbed a rag, threw it at me to cover my thumb. He went to get the thumb, put it in his pocket. We were in a hospital less than like 8 minutes. And I remember, I guess I was in shock. And when he was talking to the people up front in the emergency room, like they're asking questions about insurance, my father pulled up the thumb and said, you got to put this on ice. And when I saw my thumb in his hand, I almost fainted at that moment.
Mm.
But I remember my father, when we finally, they got me back and, they started sewing it back on. My father started to cry and he said, I want you to be able to have a regular life. I want you to be able to play baseball. He said, if they can cut my thumb off and give it to you, I would do that. And I don't know why I'm going that deep with that story, but you asked me a little bit about my fathering, and it was just like I witnessed my father modeled how to be. My father
really did
modeled how to be. And so, yeah, that's it. And so I just noticed that even on this planet right now, people they think they're really confident behind a fucking keyboard or their phone. They're just like,
they're hiding behind the screen.
And they think that they're going to really teach someone something by either being aggressive or sound super intelligent. But people really learn by how you're modeling your life.
Exactly.
Whether or not you're embodying what the hell you're saying. And that's everything. So I always want to be in truth, even be in truth when I've made a mistake.
I agree. And here's one of the things I even teach and integrate. The old adage on the truth will set you free is really true.
Absolutely.
What I say to most people is that their truth is just buried in the trash from their past that's caused them to have a set of beliefs that their life is only further validated, right? Based on the emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, environmental conditioning. And you outline it and communicate it so well. But again, I think what I even want to highlight in all of this is for you, for me, you have way more years of experience in coaching because of the path and just where you're at than I do, right? You're somebody that I could easily look at and compare myself to and make myself smaller than, right? The reality of it is, though, there are things I can and will and do learn from you in our interactions, but I also have the ability to bring things to the table. But look at this comparison game. The number of times people have said to me, oh man, my story's nothing compared to yours. You even just did it.
I did.
Right? You're an expert in this fucking space. You teach people how to do this. And yet what I'm trying to highlight is the human experience that we all are going to inevitably have every single day. The biggest thing is how do you compress time and not let it redirect your day, redirect your week, redirect your month, but allow yourself to move through it in minutes and moments. And again, the truth is what sets you free, right? Whether it's a big T or a little T trauma, at the end of the day, it is your story in the ways that it impacted you. I never fell off a 3-story roof. I never OD'd on PCP. I could sit here and say my story's less than, or I'm less, right? But yet you have shared wisdom and experiences from your own unique perspective. And that's, I think, what is important to ground in all of this. You have done this for a very long time. You have gotten a lot of media recognition. You have done these things, but I want to highlight some of the specific work that's in it, but what I also want to call really clear attention to is you talk about 2019. That was 6 years ago. You also have a 10-year-old. Your priorities dramatically changed. 4 years changing the trajectory of what that longevity of that media and exposure and that career could look like. And I would suggest that you just fully stepped into the season of dad and reshifted your priorities. So I could be wrong on that, but could you highlight just a little bit about that timeline? Because yes, you tried to ground yourself and say, yeah, it was ego. And yeah, those things don't matter to me anymore. But I think really something else just matters a lot more.
Well, first off, I wanted to share that what you just shared was basically what most people might call imposter syndrome. Yeah. I mean, you just broke it down in your own way.
Exactly.
So I just want to bring that up. As far as...
And by the way, I say imposters don't get imposter syndrome. So for the most part, I tell people, if you're feeling this, it's a good thing. You're not a sociopath and you probably are not an imposter.
Well, because there's enough humility to go, am I good enough to do this?
Exactly.
There's this other part of you is a little bit humble, So, well, and first off, it's actually more logistics, but thank you for highlighting that, I stepped into fatherhood. However, we went to the mandates, 2020. That's really it. Everyone got quiet. The studios got quiet. People started doing it elsewhere. It was really that. So everyone was afraid and it just continued. But in that moment, I moved 2 times, and that was, I was in downtown Santa Monica off 7th Street, very close to the beach. And we had the BLM protest, but it turned into a riot. Things got really crazy, and it didn't feel safe. And the homeless it was getting worse. People were falling over on drugs and stuff, fentanyl and stuff like that. So I moved to a suburb. So it was kind of like a lot of transitioning, and that's what I needed to do. So I moved into a house, and then we were still in the mandates. Santa Monica, California, everyone was angry. And I didn't want my son to feel like this is a normal childhood. For before 2020, if he were walking down the street, he's a really cute kid, old ladies would walk up to him, they'd smile. Move forward just a year later, you had old people running away like as if he were carrying a black plague. And I'm like, ah. So when my father died in 2021, I wanted to do a ceremony for him on Mount Shasta. So I flew up to Medford, Oregon, passed through Ashland. That's where I'm at now. And I fell in love with some of the parts here. But I noticed that people were actually walking around, like older people, with no mask on. And they were kind of like still keeping in shape. Like they were more connected to nature. And I'm not saying this that I'm not shaming people who wore it, but it was a little bit more normalized. And so therefore, my son, I saw other kids playing outside with their masks off. And therefore, he was able to develop emotionally and socially and not have those delays. And that's one thing I see with my son that's different than a lot of the kids, where there are those big delays when they were not going to school. So we moved up here. So it's true for the last, say, 4 or 5 years, I've been kind of moving to find a best place for my son and I. And then when I moved here, I flew his mother up a few times. She fell in love with it. And then I bought a second home and I moved her up here as well. He's only 1.5 miles from his mother.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think you had mentioned it, and maybe I didn't ask, but even you just alluded to it. You and his mother are not together and haven't been for a while.
Oh, but you want to start? So,
I mean, I just because of the way you talk about it, I want to make sure that there's some clarity.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I made a post on Facebook, and I was very open to everyone now about it. I shared a little bit here and there, but it was primarily because of safety, and also I didn't know how it could impact her. But we've only been together 2 times. So I went on a date with her, and it was not a good one, and we're not aligned. I mean, it ended in under an hour. But she thought I was attractive. I still thought she was attractive. And then she just out of the blue said, hey, pretty much let's hook up. And that was like maybe a year later, and she was on the pill. Okay. I knew very little about her relationship with someone else. I think she was separated or something. Then it happened again. And I picked her up at the airport. She came to my apartment and we hooked up. She didn't tell me she was off the pill. She gets pregnant and she asked me, like, what do I want to do? She was still living with that man. She had 2 of her other kids there as well. You can imagine everyone listening to this are like thinking this sounds like the hot mess. Yes, she was in that position at that time. And yes, I was a different person at that time. And I suggested, I'm like, well, you should maybe have an abortion, and she said she would. And I said, do you need support? How can I help? And she said, don't worry about it. Well, she never went through with it. She lied to me. And she got back together with that guy and she was pregnant the whole time with my son, Max, without me even knowing about it. Yeah. And then when he was born, a month after, she felt guilty. She sent me a text message, Maximus might be your son. I'm not 100% sure. And so I got her husband on the phone as well. I said, why don't you do a test first? He did. And he lied to her and told her it was his. You can imagine the shock.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
There's layers in this story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I ended up having a UTI from hell for about a month, which most men don't get because I was fucking pissed off. But go into month 2, Max did not look like him. I mean, he's got like a quarter Japanese in him. her husband didn't. So it's like all babies look the same when they're born. So she started asking him for the documents and he wouldn't produce it. And he started getting violent with her. I didn't know about this until later. And then so she fled. And I get a text message on January 19th, 2015 that Max is my child. And that's how he showed up. So I missed the first 5.5 months of his life, plus the pregnancy. Her and I really never had a relationship. So we needed to learn how to co-parent. I needed to learn about her and also my son at the same time. And she was suffering with PTSD. I mean, many other things. It was very crazy. It's a book. It's a book. If I share, if you were to know,
it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I think for all the reasons that you started with, and I want to reinforce this, I am very, very, very big in what stories are ours to share and what stories are others. And I appreciate you even being respectful in how you're navigating the story and how you have been for a long time, both for herself and for the impact on your son. Given what you shared, it's obvious that there were lies upon lies, deception, right? Not full transparency and communication. It was not a collaborative and joint decision, right? And to your point, you even talked about how upset you were, right? Of course there is. There's resentment, there's frustration, there's spinning, there's fear, there's all this stuff for something that's also taking place, including grieving, because you're not grieving the loss of the life that you envisioned for yourself because it wasn't a part of the plan, right? And so that's a lot of emotion to process and also ensure that you're facilitating a safe space for her and for your son. And then now full circle all the way today, you talk about, you're co-parenting, you're 1.5 miles away, you bought a house, you're providing, you're giving stability, you're doing all these things, which is in a lot of ways the ideal of what you would hope, right? For two people that have this and find a way to come together. To your point though, not everybody is able to step out of that victim mode, that anger mode, that resentment mode. And yes, this is the core of a lot of the work that you do, but you're also human and you have to do this yourself. Can you talk about the internal processing, the emotions that really identified with you at the time? And how did you actually legitimately process and release for yourself, as well as communicate to lay a foundation for a potential future that's best for your son?
So it was pretty crazy. My God.
And share only as much as you can or what's relevant. I get it. Okay.
And what I mean by this is that I wasn't set up. I was Dr. Ray. I was also Stingray in an 80s parody band. I was literally on stage most weekends performing. And so therefore I wasn't in a position to see my son. And she was in a really rough place. And she was projecting a lot of stuff onto me. I couldn't physically drive to see her. She didn't even have a car. So there's layers upon layers of what happened. Even her ex-husband called the board of psychology and said that she was my patient and I slept with her. And I had to deal with the board of psychology. They shut down my website for about a month. Oh, we're talking about
reputational harm, credibility, all of it. Jeez.
I had to hire someone to watch my business page on a back end on Facebook because there was negative shit coming from his family members attacking me. I didn't do anything to the guy except that it was not his child. He lied to me. So he was actually literally a casebook psychopath and using meth. I mean, the list goes on. A crazy guy. Well, put it this way. This guy went to prison for being one of those guys who rip off elderly people, where they phone call and they take that information. Yeah, we're talking about a real loser. Okay. So I don't usually call people names, but he was a loser. Okay.
I hear you.
Okay.
I hear you.
So anyway,
he also created a lot of damage in not only his life, but the lives of others. And so I got you.
Yeah. So what happened was for 3 months, my business actually collapsed. And it wasn't just because of my website. Energetically, I was closed down. And so therefore the universe was basically vibing off of who I had become in that moment. And I left to Florida to do a workshop, and it was pretty powerful. And it was a workshop where I had to take a lot of personal responsibility. I had to really take utter, responsibility for every conversation and whatever I had created. And in that process, I had put myself in her shoes to see what it was like to be on the receiving end of Ray Doktor. And I can see how intimidated she was by me, how she can feel my judgment. I had all of that coming at her. And so when I went through that experience and I let that go, she was also able to show up a little bit better, more trusting and open-hearted. Now, trust me, it took years for us to get to where we're at now.
Of course.
But what ended up happening was this, and this is a message that really helped me. So I helped her get into beauty school. She's so talented with anything she touches with art. And when she's going to beauty school, they have to practice on people. And my mother, she would go see Ashley, and it wasn't like she needed someone, but she would give Ashley, a big tip, like $20. And there's like 2 to 3 times she even flaked on my own mother. Like she didn't show up. She wasn't there. She didn't even reach out. And I was pissed off. I remember just, damn it, because it's my mother. Don't fuck with my mother. My mom, with her strong Japanese accent, she's like, Lemon, she don't know better. She doesn't have good parents. We have to show her. We have to show her. And that's what my mother said. She, and my father was the same way. He's with his Marine tone. And she hasn't even admitted that she grew up in, say, white trash. I'm not saying this out of a judgment, but the whiskey tango, whatever label you want to call it, she grew up in that environment. Her father was in prison, in and out the first 16 years of her life. Her mother did meth, and one of her mother's boyfriends raped her. I mean, this woman had trauma after trauma.
Yeah.
And so she was showing up the best that she could. So even my father said, they grew up on the other side of the track. And my parents, are older. They had their shit together. They can see it. And they just said, remember, she is still the mother of your child. And your child is going to witness how you treat his mother. And that was key. And so even I would shield him from some of our conversations that got tense. But there was a point that happened when it was 2019 when my mother died, is when she went to a really weird place and she said something that was really cold. And again, I don't like to share stuff because I don't want her to be judged. But what happened was my mother died at 1:03 a.m. And it was 6 hours after, and she wanted to talk to my son or her son. And I said, we're not in a good place right now. And she said, I know your mother died, but his grandmother here is still alive. It's the first time my son heard me swear and raise my voice. And so I recognized I couldn't hold this back anymore. So I started talking to my son in a transparent way of kind of certain things without judgment. So my son actually knows the entire story. He's 10 and a half, everything.
By the way, I was hoping that was the case. I figured that was the case for you. I was going to ask you. I'm so happy you went.
Yeah. He even knows that because just imagine him getting older and being pissed off at me and saying, you wanted me to be aborted. I mean, everything's out there in the open. He's totally cool. But he's also witnessed the type of men that his mother has dated, and they are trouble. She's now in a really great, thriving relationship. I have adopted her boyfriend in a way. Like, I love the guy. And so she's grounded, she's working, she's stable, she's sober. Everything got better. My son witnessed all of that. He watched all of that. And his mother tells him all the time, you have an amazing father. I wish I had a father like that. I wish I had a father like that.
I got chills when you told me what your mother said.
Yeah.
We have to show her, right? Yeah. I think so often it goes back even to what you had said in the answer prior.
Yeah.
Right. It's congruence in who you are and how you live your life with what you teach.
Yes.
Right. It's do you believe what you actually spew out of your mouth, right? And how you help other people. And do you apply this in your own life? And by the way, I have to tell you, and I hope you take this with as much respect as I can wrap it with. I have interviewed many very incredible leaders, people with lots of credibility and things behind their name as well, and many who are absolutely the real deal. But what I can sense in you is there is a deeper level of surrender and acceptance by you for who you are, and a deeper level of congruence in the authenticity of who you are and how you live. You're in the top 0.5% of anybody I've ever interacted with.
Wow, thank you.
And I just really want to tell you, I really appreciate that about you, because you are the model. You are the example. You're also the solution, right? And the compassion and love that you are able to represent goes back even to what we talked about before. The truth always sets us free.
Yeah.
My wife and I are like you. We are very transparent and very truthful to an age appropriate level. But guess what? We also often protect them beyond when they're actually ready to hear it as well.
Yeah.
And so we challenge it, and it's important. Go ahead.
I have taken it through different stages, the information for what he can understand. So as he's got older, he's understood it a little bit deeper because his consciousness is expanding. What's really funny, to take this to a lighter note, is I had basically a American Pie Jim and Dad conversation last night. And it's where he said, Dad, when did you start to ejaculate? And I said, when I was 12 years old, I actually thought I broke it. I said, my parents never shunned me about sexuality, but they didn't have these transparent conversations. He said, yeah, stuff is coming out now. I said, dude, I go, for how long? He's like, well, maybe a couple of months. I go, where are you putting it, dude? I go, do not beat him and put it in a sock. I said, and we say it with humor. I said, yes. Because what do I do with it? I go, well, there's hand towels, but just make sure it goes into the washer. He's still laughing about that. I swear to it. He said this when I'm walking out the door. He says, Dad, I said, what? He says, you don't have to worry about the pie.
Oh my gosh.
He said something like, you don't worry. You don't have to worry if you get a pie or something like that. I'm like, oh my God.
I love that. Again, deep alignment. My son and I have the exact same conversations. I have had almost the identical conversation with my son. And it's at a point too that it's kind of funny, because my son's also on the spectrum and has ADHD. And so sometimes he's very literal and structured in the way that he thinks, right? And call that a label, call that how he's neurologically wired, whatever. I understand how it operates for him, but he also feels the need to be really truthful and honest all the time. So almost too much. He tells me every time he'll come up, he'll be like, Dad, I'm going to go to my room for the next 20 or 30 minutes and touch myself. I'll be like, bro, you could just tell me that you're going to go to your room and you need some quiet time. I appreciate that you want to tell me. Right? I'm here to answer any questions, but I don't need to know every time. That was not an area that, though I was educated around the logistics of sex and bodies, there was a ton of shame around all that for me.
Yeah.
A ton of shame. And it created a lot of constriction and restriction in my own relationship with my body and sexuality and exploration. And I don't want any of that for my kids.
Yes.
So I'm like, how do we, but we have conversations with other parents, like you talked about earlier, where they're like, your son or your daughter, they said this, or they know. I'm like, yeah. And is that true or not true? It's true. It's just not appropriate. Well, I don't know what to tell. We have to cater it back to the appropriate place and time. However, what you're conditioning is you're building a relationship that, one thing I've surrendered to is that all of us as parents are guaranteed going to screw our kids up in some way that we just don't see. There's some unconscious pattern that could be a block. The difference between what you're doing and what we're attempting to do as well is that there's no shame around that, and there's open pathways of discussion around it. And so they choose to have a relationship with us beyond a certain point, and they will be willing to come to us with the problems that are in front of them, up to and including the ways they've learned to articulate about themselves with us also. And you talk about how your dad modeled this by example in little moments, but you've also done a shitload of work beyond what both of your parents were capable of with the tools they were given at the time. And so how much of what you do as a father is going down to what you believe based on what you've been teaching for 30 years versus how much of it has been developed and evolved because you became a father?
It's both. I would say more of this, that when I became a father, I started to embody love. Rather than teaching people about purpose and presence, I actually became more of that with my son. So my heart just opened up more, and I started walking more of my talk. But not just that, like I've kind of been on what we can call a winning streak where I've continued to say either make more money or I keep making the best choices. So I'm in a outstanding relationship with a woman who has a son who's is a year and a half younger than my son. My son and her son love each other and they do get along really well. So like, it's like this perfect kind of Brady Bunch thing too. That would be an example. And we're moving together June 18th to Asheville. And so we just, everything continues to be right. And Max's mother will still be here. However, I am to go there to check it out for 6 months to 12 months to let her know that it's good. Then I will probably eventually move her as well. But I told her, I said, let me just make sure that, it's all working because they had the hurricane. And so, things, and I've been there already since then, but it's just, I want to be transparent with her, but I don't go in fear like, oh my God, like there's going to be a problem, because here's the thing. First off, my father, his father died when he was 2. Okay. His mother died when he was 15. My father was in World War II when he was 17 years old. He was in the Marines for 30 years. He was in over 400 battles with gunfire and lived. My dad had extreme great leadership. So he taught me grit. That was the emotional conditioning I needed to handle these dynamics that happened when I was going through this process of finding out that I was a new father. That I really got a lot of that with my father, because
of course,
again, when stuff would happen, he wouldn't necessarily lose his shit. Like he was able to be he was an emotional person still. Had a moon in Scorpio. I saw my dad cry at least 50 times. But he's also very strong. And I know people hearing this, especially animal lovers, are going to go, "Oh my God!" But I'll give you an example. It was like 1972, 71. I don't know. There was a dog that had either rabies. I remember having shit all over its mouth, and it killed a poodle. I remember seeing the guts scattered, and they had called the police. And there wasn't really animal control. It was the police, and the police would just shoot the animal. And I remember just, being out there, and there was this big, like, all these neighbors were out there. My dad just walks out there with a handgun, just one shot, and then just walks back into the house, sits down, just reads his newspaper. Nothing, whether he's desensitized or not. The police knocked on our door. He talked to them. They let him go. They respected him because, he was a military man. We were still in the Vietnam War and all of that. But in a way, he would take care of business. Now, today, someone hearing this might go, "Oh my God, that's toxic masculinity." It was
also very time appropriate.
Yeah. He was a man of his times, but he would get stuff done, and he never did it out of reaction. He never would lose his shit. So he was pretty calm. And so therefore I modeled that.
You understood how to regulate your emotion and use it for good earlier in life, right? I mean, I had a different path than you. Mine went down the different path. Yeah. Mine was reaction and anger and shame and creating damage in my life that caused me to wake up and see it someday, right? But to have that type of model early on is really, really powerful. You have done a ton of things, but you also referenced metaphysics. You've talked about vibration and frequency. Again, there's lots of similar topics. And I'm a big believer in the healthy blended intentionality between Eastern and Western medicine. What I'm curious about is if there were a handful of beliefs, modalities, or tools that you have either developed or learned that have the most amount of impact in getting people from a place of perseveration and being stuck to clarity and movement. What do you believe those to be as someone who yourself compresses time in minutes and moments in the way you coach?
Well, this is the perfect time to do my sales pitch. My book. This is why I wrote it. I mean, honestly, I didn't really make any money off it because I did most of the promotion on my own, but it was to give to clients, prospective clients who maybe are thinking about working with me, to clients who are now working with me. But I put everything in there to do some self-breakthrough. My mentor, Dr. Morris Netherton, worked with Fritz Perls, Carl Rogers, some pretty famous people from, the 60s who kind of went a different direction from traditional psychoanalysis. And so therefore I learned, he also trained Grinder and Bandler, who are the developers of, they developed NLP and they taught Tony Robbins. My book basically has, it's not an NLP book, but it's a book in where there's teachings that have not been put out there that I put in here to help people go through their self breakthrough. That would be it. I could easily say, try plant medicine, but do this for integration to, but I honestly can say
everything has a caveat, because there's also not a singular prescriptive path for any of them, by the way.
Yeah. So,
I got you.
And another thing to share about, like, to go down a rabbit hole is, like, some people who listen to this, I don't know if they're into channeling, but those who know Abraham or Bashar, who Daryl channels him, I've had about 12 private conversations with him. My book has been written with some of that information, that influence. And so I was, I guess you say, blessed or privileged to be in Los Angeles and make that connection. So it'd be like those who know who Abraham is, just imagine having a cup of tea and, like, you're just talking to the person one-on-one. So in fact, as an example, when my father died and Daryl brought Bashar through, I said, is there anything I need to know about my dad or where he's at? And it's funny, like, Daryl channeling Bashar, it's like, for some reason, I'm it's somewhere tropical. I'm tasting papaya, blah, blah, blah. When my brother was struggling with it more, who lives in Hawaii. Yeah. And even my mother, when she passed away, I had her channeled, or this is even better. When she passed away, 3 days later, I had someone channel her, and my dad was still alive. And I asked the channeler, is there anything my mother would like to say to my dad? And she said, the channeler was a female, said, she's saying something like, meet her at there's this restaurant that has blue curtains and brown tables, and it's not super fancy. Meet my mother there. Well, I went and told my father that. He said, that's where I met your mother. That was a restaurant we met at. Yeah. Some pretty cool stuff here. Yeah. So
what I appreciate about even what you just hit in the modalities is whether it's plant-based medicine, whether it's channeling, whether it's, understanding how to do cellular memory activation, whether it's nervous system regulation, right? Like, I'm a big believer that the strategy and tactics are not what get us there. They're just the places that help us be successful, right? We always know it's the things that are tied behind it. But what I find so often is that the universal truth is accessible to all of us.
Yes.
That channeling can be possible for all of us, that we can actually connect in lots of ways. Not everybody is as primed for it based on where their natural intuition would be or their life circumstances or whatever. But I do believe that there is intuition and there is learning in both of it. What I would ask for you is if you were to be recognized or known for your ability to compress time for people, to be that person in those shows that takes 5 minutes and uncovers the most profound elements that are keeping them blocked, how would that be described by those who've received it or witnessed it?
It would be that I was able to find the primary hidden belief that was controlling their fears, to their trust issues, to what was keeping them from moving forward. And not only would I help them find that hidden belief, I would be able to counteract it by what they truly desire and what they can embody in that moment to start shifting that experience so they can become that which they prefer in that moment.
Yeah.
I
really appreciate how you described that. Keep going. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Even in my book, I described, there's 5. Basically, there's a, let me see if I can remember this. It's funny, dude. I wrote this book, and when I started going on these freaking podcasts to somewhat promote it, I would talk about it and I forgot even what was in a book, and I had to reread it. But so there's a section,
I totally understand that.
Yeah. But there's a section I talk about the typical path of healing. And number 1 is that you realize that you have a problem. You're like, oh shit, I have a problem. I've got 3 DUIs. I've went through 5 divorces. Shit, maybe it's me. Okay. Number two, you start talking about it. And usually it's with your friends. Hey, do you have this problem with libido? Or do you have this problem with relationships or whatever? And they reflect back that, yeah. And they might even tell you that we've always seen that in you. You always chase the hot mess. Then three, you start talking to a professional, maybe a coach, or maybe someone who's not biased, maybe a rabbi. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Number four, you unearth the influences, the abuse, what you shared that your childhood was. However, number four is typically where people get stuck. And they keep talking about, I am this way because of what had happened. It's like as if what had happened to them is the totality of who they are today. They get stuck there.
Yeah.
And that's why you'll see people in therapy for 20 years and they're just managing still their problems. Number five is how do you put it into action? How do we live now? Whether that's positive affirmations, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's really surrendering your guard and really finally feeling your heart. It's that process, those 5 steps. Yeah. So that's my method. That's how I work with all my clients.
I very much appreciate it. By the way, I always say that no matter the language, like people like us are speaking universal truth. It's just how we communicate it that makes it accessible.
Yes.
Right. Again, our whole process is awareness, stepping into ownership, which is both creating repair and discussing it, unpacking the source or sources, flipping the lid to be able to reclaim the moments in the present so that it doesn't actually own us and redirect us. But ultimately then the trigger mapping process that allows us to move in all of this by deeper understanding, right? It's really like actually taking that level of intention. And what I really appreciate, and you're one of the only people that I've heard say this in the way that you did that is so in alignment with what I say. Most people, when they become aware, just become more aware of all the ways they should be judging themselves. Right. Yes, yeah. And at the end of the day, therapists, in most regards, because of the ethical limitations and the lack of tools that they're able to deploy or frankly, their own blocks that can't get them there, keep people spinning and asking why questions that just are never ending and perpetual versus future focused and objective. Like, what can I extract from this? What did I learn from this? What could I or would I do differently next time now that I know what I know? And that's often what it comes down to is like, how do you start to see things more clearly? How do you uncover and identify truth? And so that's what your whole book is outlining. And what I also appreciate is the simplicity. You even call it, all it takes is one, right? Just one hidden belief. It's one moment, one breath, one step at a time. If we know that when we protect ourselves, we disconnect ourselves. If we know that we can have these beliefs that create patterns, you're also somebody who's very aware. And I also know that you believe there's no final destination because you're constantly working on yourself every day.
Yep.
What's the one thing, the one hidden belief that you're surfacing right now to be able to continue to unlock the next stage of your full potential?
I'm still working on the idea of impatience. Yeah, impatience. And that is because, the idea is I have fiery energy. I'm a Leo, which there might be some truth. I live in a small town, so people literally drive really freaking slow here. But I also moved here because it was for me to take pause and also heal my body. So my body's also moving through some subtle things as well. I have cortisol dysregulation. When I was playing in my band, I would get home at 4:30. I'd be up at 7 o'clock. I would get my son from my friend Amy, who's his godmother, and be pounding 4 cups of coffee. I blew up my adrenals. So after 10 years of all of this is like, I'm here. So I'm not in busy LA or that busy identity I used to be. So it's being patient with the moment, patient with myself, because my body needs to heal and slow down. That's what I'm working on.
I appreciate your honesty a lot. And I understand and appreciate this. I try to remind myself every day because I struggle with the same thing. The timing is always perfect when I allow it.
Yeah. Well, if you're a goal or me, I'm all about time freedom. So if something takes me too much time,
I understand.
Yeah.
Because it feels like waste and it doesn't feel like you're aligned in the ways that you want to. I totally get it. I appreciate you leaning right in and discussing it.
I have a question for you. So as an example, first off, I have a team that sends out emails to potential people who have podcasts. And when they respond, then I'll do my research and so forth. But those who want to set up a discovery call and go through this whole process, because it's going to take my time and I know I'm really good on this, I kind of cringe. However, you put me through the process of getting on Instagram. And I'm curious if that's kind of like your discovery call. So
it's 100%.
Oh, it's
100%.
Amazing, dude. I love it.
Yeah, why? Because I still add value, and I can know in 15 minutes if there's an energetic exchange and if they can run, if they're willing to go deep, if they're there, if they're not. And it's still value to them because I'm still promoting them to my audience. We still create subclips.
Dude,
we still
win-win.
And guess what? If you don't get through to my long form show, I still gave you value.
Yeah, it's fucking brilliant. I actually share that with my friends. I'm like, this is how I would do it. If I had my own podcast show, I would like take people through that because no matter what, they're going to get value. It's going to help you get views. It's going to be win-win for everyone, and also vet people before 100%. They get on this program.
I disclosed that. And in fact, I'm pretty sure we got an email from you and your team at one point, and that's how we started the whole process. And we just said, hey, we get tons of inquiries for this, but I give full disclosure to people who reach out.
Yes.
Right now, are there exceptions to the rule? Yes, but I didn't know who you were. Yeah. Right? We'd never met. And so if I get a referral or it's a good friend that I already know their story, are there a handful of people who've bypassed that process? Yeah. But largely, it's been so consistent for me, and it removes all the friction because why? I get to meet 3 people in 45 minutes, 3 people who want to go on my long form show, and I can determine in 45 minutes, are any of those ones that I want to go deeper with?
Yes.
And I know typically in less than 5 minutes.
It's amazing. You have no idea. And this is not to talk shit, but I have been on some podcasts where I feel like I'm pulling teeth where it's hard, and that's a long hour. And I will not
because a lot of
that 100% ever for myself. So yes.
I don't want to have to carry a conversation for an hour. I don't need to I don't need that at this point in my life, right? I want people that can go back and forth. There's energy exchange. It's conversational, right? I get to talk about certain things, but I'm still interviewing and extracting. Yes. And I'm happy that you picked up on that, right? Not only do we communicate that, but I teach that to other people. It's it's people who say, I want to start a podcast. Cool. I had a live show for 18 months before I had a formal podcast. Why? Because it gave me a chance to have 3 cool new conversations every single week, have a pipeline of opportunities, do media distribution and create connections, leverage other people's platforms, right? And it removed all the friction from the process.
Yep.
I'm really big on removing resistance, interference, and friction in anything because when we are clear, we flow, right? And so I appreciate that you not only played the game, but that you picked up on it and you saw the value in it because I'm the same way. I won't do intake preview interviews. If that's what a show requests, I've been on over 1,000 shows as a guest.
Yes.
I don't need the rehearsal. I don't need to prove my value. I will bring it with little or no direction. Let's just roll live. I don't need questions ahead of time. I don't need you to tell me the framing of the show. I'll follow. I'm a pro. I can do this.
I love it.
Right?
You're great. And I'm the same way. So if I feel like it's pulling weeds to get there, I'm like, I've done this many times. I mean, same thing. Yeah. I have a lot of experience on camera.
But on the same token, I hold true to my standards if I don't see somebody else. We just had somebody who's a really well-known author with a very big book that's blown up in the last decade. Very well-known name. Got introduced to him through a personal friend and told him his process, right? And I said, look, because I know who you are and I know that who's recommending you, I would bypass the first show if you want to. However, this is the case. They've got a rule in their world. They will not do any interview for longer than 30 minutes. Doesn't fit the format of my show. Thank you, but no thank you. Yeah. I don't need to make an exception for what I'm trying to produce. But again, that's what I want to make sure is that every interaction has value on both sides. And if it doesn't, why am I doing it?
Yes. Yeah, 30 minutes would be more probably a pitch about the book, maybe. Who knows?
That's what I mean. The way that I want to go this show, I want depth. I want real conversations. I want stories to surface in the conversation just like they did naturally. Why? Because that's fucking life.
Yeah, yeah.
And what you said right out of the gate is the truth. Change is the only guarantee.
Yep.
Life is about learning to exist in the chaos and still be centered, grounded, clear, and okay.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And then the choices we make to support it. Bro, I feel like I could talk to you all day long.
We'll do it again, man.
I have a feeling we're going to do some more, both formally and informally, just because there is deep alignment. But as we bring this to a wrap, because I want to respect your time and all that you've given so far today, I could bring this down in a very simplistic manner. We're going to put all your links, all your stuff in the show notes. So you don't need to promote anything. It's all going to be there. I want to encourage people to go learn from you because you truly are speaking truth. What is a message you want to leave the audience with today?
Be easy on yourself. Just be easy on yourself. If you really listened to this entire conversation and you heard, how we here, supposedly you and I are coaches and we're, say, trying to be the best as we can be. Both Brian and I are still looking at ourselves from that lens of this is life. You're perfect where you are right now. And whatever permission slip you need to expand your consciousness, to love yourself more, do that. Whether it's with crystals or going to church, whether it's listen to this, this conversation a second time, it's just whatever is your permission slip, then use that. It doesn't have to be that difficult.
Yeah. Bro, I really appreciate that. That is golden advice. It's timeless. It's real. I really appreciate your heart and how you show up in the world as a man, as a husband. Well, not as a husband, as a father. I said as a husband, and that was wrong. That was me projecting onto you. That was like, I don't know where that word came from because I know that you're not a husband right now. However, you're a man who's creating a shitload of impact. And I would say that your co-parenting shows up in a way that demonstrates the level of care that many marriages even lack. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to just suggest is the way that you love in the world is obvious. And I'm grateful for the opportunity that we've had to get to know each other a little bit better today.
Well, I want to share something back to you. This, honestly, has probably been my best conversation with a man.
Oh, wow. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, really.
Thank you. I fully received that from you, brother. Very much. Yeah. Very, very grateful for this. So
I have a best friend named Eric. I have a best friend named Eric who we've done a lot of conversations. That's different. We talk all the time anyway. You and I have only spoken twice, and this is very fun, very exciting for me. So yeah,
I appreciate that on many levels, my friend. Very, very grateful for you being with us today. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And for those of you that just watched Ray jump open and flip open his lid, guess what? To be easy on yourself, you have to step into truth. You have to ask those questions. You have to be willing to receive love. You have to be willing to give love, and you have to ultimately be willing to do whatever it takes. Right? At the end of the day, this isn't about ego. This isn't about performance. This isn't about vanity. This is about realizing that everything you need, you already have. But that also allows you to have and ask for more. Just because you have everything you have in this moment doesn't mean that there's still not questions, opportunity, and growth for tomorrow, right? But it also means that to give yourself that permission slip, what I want to highlight for each and every one of you is you're the only one who can write that permission slip. You're the only one who can sign it, and you're the only one that can actually allow yourself the ability to step in and do the work that's necessary to create freedom on the other side of truth. Well, what's it going to require for you? To flip open your lid and scan your can. We'll see you next time. What you can probably tell by now is that I love telling these stories, but what I love even more is the impact that's coming from them. You see, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible, but to do that, we need you. See, we believe that moved people move people. And so all I'm asking is if you've resonated, connected with any of the messaging, please consider commenting, sharing, leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for tuning into Flipping the Lid. And if you want more information on the show, how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or any of the other details, head over to flippingthelid.com. We'll see you there.